And welcome to Counsel's Corner, everyone. I'm Renata Steele, and I am talking with Mike Brown, an attorney with Ziff Law Firm. And Mike, we're talking about some of the legal developments surrounding daylight saving. There's some legislation on the table in Washington that would make some changes. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, we just turned the clocks forward 1 hour on the 13th. And we all know it all kinds of throws us off, at least for a couple of days as we make those adjustments. So tell us a little bit about the background of daylight saving time, and then we'll get into some of the legislation that could change that.
Yeah, certainly. I know when the news broke on Tuesday, a lot of parents were excited because if you have young kids, you know it kind of throws everybody for a little bit of a loop, and dealing with some kids that are a little bit more tired than usual in the mornings. But there's actually quite a bit of history to daylight savings. The idea can be traced as far back to Benjamin Franklin in the 1700s. And then it was kind of used inconsistently in the US, throughout the early 1900s. But it really wasn't until 1966 when it became standardized with the passage of the Uniform Time Act. And the idea, as most people know, was to try and make the best use of the daylight, and maybe even save on some costs, electricity and whatnot. And whether we did or not is up for debate. I know some studies as to whether or not we actually saved any money, but it's still up for debate. Then in 2005, President Bush signed the Energy Policy Act, which essentially extended the period of daylight savings. Prior to that act, daylight savings ended in the last Sunday of October and didn't return until the last Sunday of April. Now it extends later into November, so it starts the first Sunday of November before returning earlier in the spring on the second Sunday of March. And as you mentioned, and as a lot of people know, on Tuesday, the Senate passed what's called the Sunshine Protection Act that would make daylight savings time permanent starting in November 2023. So if it does become law, we would still have to change the clocks one more time this fall and one more time next spring. There is a lot of bipartisan support for this bill. It passed unanimously in the Senate, which is obviously a very rare occurrence, but there's still some hurdles that we have to go through before it becomes law. It still has to pass the House of Representatives before it can go to President Biden for his signature. There's no indication or not much of an indication on any timelines for the House to act on it, or any indication if the president will support this. There is a little bit of opposition from some people that have expressed concerns that the mornings are just going to be too dark, as late as 9 a.m., which is going to be very disruptive, if not dangerous, to kids going to school during that time. So right now, it's still a little bit unclear of, what's going to happen. Are we going to have a permanent clock, and what times may we be working with? Back in 1974, this was actually tried to some degree, and it didn't get a lot of support, actually. So maybe we should be careful what we wish for, but that's kind of where things stand.
And what I found kind of interesting in doing a little research on this too is that the state of Arizona, as a singular state, does not participate in daylight saving. So they do their own thing, regardless of what the country decides to do.
Correct, Arizona and Hawaii. So they're on their own.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you joining us to break down this legislation. And like you mentioned, the House has yet to act on it. I know House Speaker Pelosi said she is reviewing the legislation. So I guess stay tuned on what may behold daylight saving time.
That's right.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike, and to everyone at Ziff Law for joining us week after week for Counsel's Corner. We really appreciate your insight.